right, and welcome back to the Browns Beat podcast. I am one half of your co-host. My name is Tristan. I'm here with my man Derek. Derek, how are we doing today?
We're doing good, man. God is good. It's been a crazy week. It's been a really good week. Hope everybody's Memorial Day was really good. I had a really fun time. I had a chance to kind of reconnect with some friends that I haven't talked to in a long time. A little bit sore playing football for like 4 hours straight. It was kind of rough waking up the next day, Tristan. But other than that, doing really good. How was your Memorial Day?
It was good, man. Got an opportunity to spend some time with some family, which is always a good thing, you know. Enjoying the day and the extra day long weekend, and of course the greater important thing, recognizing and honoring our troops for the holiday, for their sacrifices and such. It's we're lucky to have them. So,
Absolutely.
But transitioning from that, we are going to talk a little bit about the Browns. We've been taking a little bit of a break, a little bit longer than we wanted because we had this podcast recorded, and then technology did what technology does, and it lets you down.
Yeah. For those of you who think this is as simple as just hitting record, it is not. It is not. There are multiple issues that show themselves at times. And it just so happened, like Tristan just said, we got done recording the whole thing. Great. Awesome. And nothing was usable. So here we are again. If you're seeing this time, it worked. So that's a fantastic thing. But yeah, let's talk again, Tristan, about everything that we talked about.
Yes. So, pretty much what our main overall discussion was about. What we're going to be discussing today is the Browns' schedule release. Talking about just how the season plays out, each game, kind of just doing an initial, scraping of the surface and kind of diving into the games that we think could be the most crucial for the Browns this year. But before we did get into that, before we kind of dive into the meat and the potatoes of the podcast, let's eat our broccoli and let's go through a story that came out about Rodney McLeod. I believe it was NBC Sports that reported that Rodney McLeod stated that this was going to be his last year in the NFL. Part of the reason for him deciding to not retire this past offseason was that he was a player that prided himself on being available, being healthy, being able to play a complete season. And unfortunately, he just did not get to do that last year in Cleveland. And he felt like the season was left incomplete. And Derek, two-parter here. Number one, when you reflect on the career of Rodney McLeod as a whole, but also when we put the microscope to him and we look at his time so far in Cleveland, what are kind of the first initial thoughts that come to your mind about him? And then the other thing is, what do you make about his comments about, feeling like last year was incomplete?
Yeah, so Rodney McLeod has been a very good player for a long time in the NFL. And I said it before, there's a lot of players that really play at a high level, and then for whatever reason, they just go from elite tier to they're just a guy. And I think McLeod, he's not been elite, but he's been really good, I would say, his whole career. And, for him to get a Super Bowl, for him to play on some good teams, play at a pretty high level for the vast majority of his career, that's a heck of an accomplishment. That is not something to just write over and ignore. So I think for him, he's got a heck of a career that he can hang his hat on, for sure. I would definitely be proud, if I were him, of everything that he's done in the National Football League. And, the connections with Jim Schwartz, playing in his defense, and this kind of ties into your second question. Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of stones left unturned this past year. And unfortunately for the Browns, it was not because of us. It was because of the outside factors, dealing with injuries, trying to go through that next man up process. It's not as simple as just next man up. It's the fit, how guys work with each other. It's that correlation there between your starters, your scheme, and your depth. And yeah, this team went 11-6, Tristan, last year, regardless. And when you look at somebody like Rodney McLeod, a guy who has a lot of connection with Jim Schwartz, has had a lot of success in the Jim Schwartz defense, you look at that, you say, okay, my career's coming to an end here. This is a good football team. You know, he was in that locker room. He believes in this team. That's what he's saying here by coming back another season. And, you know, the ability to do that with a team you believe in, a coach who has kind of proven himself now, 2-time coach of the year, and then a defensive coordinator who was unbelievable last year, led one of the best defenses, if not arguably the best defense in the National Football League. If you get a chance to kind of run that back and, you know, hope that everything goes as planned as far as the outside factors and the injuries that we dealt with, absolutely. 100% agree with him that, you know, there were stones left unturned. The work was not finished. And it's unfortunate, but the good reality is, guess what? Time keeps ticking. You know, another season's come, and you get the chance to right the wrongs of last year. So I'm very happy to have him back. I do think he is a good depth piece impact player. You know, it's important to have a veteran in a room like our secondary room, which is full of a lot of young guys, and especially at the safety position. Thornhill is not very old. Delpit, not very old. And then you look at the two UDFA signings from 2 years ago now, a year ago now. Ronnie Hickman, D'Anthony Bell. Those guys
was two. Ronnie was one.
Yeah, yeah. But those guys are young. Those guys are very young. And to have a guy like Rodney McLeod staying in that room, veteran presence, been there, done that, I think it's incredibly valuable. And I really do believe, Tristan, we'll talk about it later, but I do believe this team can make a run. And, you know, for Rodney's sake, let's add another ring to that finger. Let's add another one, right? It's great to have one, but it's even better to have two. So I'm all about it. I'm happy he's coming back, and regardless of how the season goes, I think he's had an incredible career. I think he's been an incredible player for a long time. So I'm happy for him. He's kind of made his peace with it, and let's make the most out of this season.
Yeah, well said. You know, just to kind of go a little bit deeper into like Rodney McLeod, like full picture. The guy was an undrafted free agent, right? Mm-hmm. He's been in the league for 10 plus years. You know, when I think about what like if I try to place myself in the shoes of a college football player that's trying to make a pro, right? For the vast majority of players in college, they're not going to be able to model their game after Myles Garrett, right? Because Myles Garrett's just got that superhuman freak of nature, godlike talent, and he pairs it up with the fantastic work ethic, right? But I think that players should idolize players like Rodney McLeod, because Rodney McLeod has turned what should have been something that made it unlikely for him to ever touch a football field, being an undrafted free agent, and he's turned it into an extremely long career. And I think that goes under the radar with a lot of guys, especially guys like Rodney, who, you know, aren't the biggest, aren't the fastest, aren't the strongest. You know, they sometimes are on the bad end of bad plays, you know, and occasionally they're on the good end of good plays, but it's yin and yang, right? You know, but Rodney McLeod has made a hell of a career for himself. I mean, when we talk about like what the model professional is, that's what he's been his whole career, right? He's been a guy that's worked hard. He's been a guy that's learned. He's been a guy that has been able to be flexible and be available, like he said. Like, that's something that he prided himself on before last year's injury. You know, this is just a situation where, you know, it's coming to the end of the road for him, and I'm happy that he wanted to be here, Like that's something that I as a Browns fan, I take pride in that, knowing that a guy like that, a guy who has had a career like that, wants to finish here in Cleveland. Like that's important in my opinion. Like I think that it means something. And when we talk about, you know, what Rodney as a Cleveland Brown, what that means to us, right? The Anthony Bell and Ronnie Hickman have numerous times said how important Rodney McLeod has been for their development. And I think it shows because, you know, I don't know if you remember, Derek, because there were very few times, like a couple years ago in D'Anthony Bell's rookie year, where he was on the field, but he really wasn't looking great. Like he in the minimal snaps that he had. And then we look at the jump that he had when he had to play. And I think that a lot of it can be attributed to D'Anthony putting the time in and working really, really hard to improve. And I think we have to give him that credit. But when you have a player like Rodney McLeod who's played so much football and, you know, doesn't have those otherworldly natural talents to learn from, you know what? Like that means something to him, and that means something to Ronnie, and it means something to our young corners like MJ Emerson, Greg Newsome. Like those guys, even though they've been in the league for a few years, they've got a lot to learn, and Rodney McLeod provides that education for them. You know, so I think that Rodney played a bigger role on the team last year than I think people will initially realize, and I wouldn't be shocked if once when he does retire, there's a job on the staff waiting for him here.
Yeah.
That would not shock me at all. And I would hope that's the case. I hope he wants to get into coaching, because if we can find a way to keep him around, I'd love to have it, because I think that he just provides so much off the field. And even on the field, he's played a good role for us. He played a good role for us last year. So, you know, time will tell to see what evolves for him in the future. But when we talk about this year, right, when he says that he felt like last year was incomplete, I feel like, I know he said it specifically in terms of his injuries, but I have to feel like the way that we lost to the Texans is just not a way that he can go out, right? Because number one, not being available for that game, but number two, just the way that team kind of rallied, the way that the team pushed forward, even with the best players being hurt. I think he realizes that this is also a team that has that potential to win a Super Bowl. And I think that that's something that we realize. I think that's something that a lot of other teams, while it's not nationally recognized, I think they recognize the talent. And, you know, time will tell to see if this team's going to become a Super Bowl contender. But I'll be damned if we don't have the talent to do it. So I think that Rodney is looking at all of this combined, and I think that was ultimately what influenced him. And you know what? We'll see if it ended up being a good bet for him. Whether it's a deep playoff run or going all the way, who knows? But time will tell. We'll see.
Indeed, it will. So let's pivot here and let's take a look at this schedule. So the Browns schedule was released, and it is very interesting. I'm just going to read down the list, but before I do, I just want to point out 8 home games, 9 away games. The Browns have 4 primetime games, Thursday night football, Monday night football. Those are back-to-back. And then Thursday night football, Sunday night football. And those are back-to-back. So, find that interesting. But just taking a look down the schedule here, the Browns open, Browns versus Cowboys, 4:25 kick. Then week 2, Browns Jags, Browns Giants, Browns Raiders, Browns Commanders. Important cut there. Browns Eagles, Browns Bengals, Browns Ravens, Browns Chargers. And then it's bye week. So we have a bye week, week 10 this time instead of the week 4 or 5, whatever it was last year. So that's an improvement. And then after the bye week, it's Browns Saints, Browns Steelers. That's your first primetime game, Thursday Night Football. Browns Broncos rather. That's Monday Night Football. And then it's Browns Steelers again, Browns Chiefs, Browns Bengals, Browns Dolphins, Sunday Night Football. I forgot to mention the Bengals game is a primetime game. And then finishing up week 18 against the Baltimore Ravens. So, Tristan, when you hear that schedule, and now that it's been a little bit of time to kind of process the schedule and take more of a look at it, what's your initial thoughts? What are we thinking here? How do you feel about it? And yeah, it's a good start.
My first initial reaction is that week 18 game, week 18 game against the Ravens is gonna either be the most nerve-wracking game of all time for one of those teams at least, or it's gonna mean nothing at all, and we love that. That's fun. But who knows? I just hope it's in the Browns' favor. Let's hope for that. But yeah, no, I think a lot has been said about this team's schedule being the hardest schedule in the league. And when you look at it, there's a lot of hard games there. No doubt about it. But at the same time, the top three teams with the hardest schedule is Browns, Ravens, Steelers. So, I think a lot of that has to factor in the fact that we're playing against divisional opponents. Like, our divisional opponents are so much harder than all the other divisions, right? The strength of it, I should say, from top to bottom. So, you know what, man? How do I put this? Like, I just think that the Browns are going to have to persevere no matter what. And when I look at the beginning of the schedule, right, before we get into that Philly game, those are winnable games. Even the Philly game, I mean, I feel as though this team's good enough that every game is a winnable game. Like, I don't think that there's any games we're just flat out not going to win. But that's a stretch where it's like, hey, you should be like at a very decent record at least. Like, I'm talking 2 losses max throughout that time. That's the stretch that I see. And then when we look down the end of the line, ultimately what matters most is how we do in the division. And that's what this is going to come down to this year. But I guess my initial thoughts are, while it is a hard schedule, it's not like it's Everest, right? Like, we're not like scaling mountains here. It's just, we're going to have to play some tough football, and that's okay. We should be able to persevere.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is a very tough schedule. This is the toughest schedule on paper in the National Football League. The Browns are going to play 12 teams that finished with a winning record last year. So, and listen, it just comes down to this. I think despite it being a tough schedule on paper, I think the NFL did give us some favors here. Opening against the Dallas Cowboys, that's going to be a tough game. That's going to be a big game. Tom Brady's first professional commentary debut. That's a huge moment. That's something that's going to be looked back on for a long time. So, Deshaun, you better show up to play your best football, pal. But then after that, you look at it, Jaguars, Giants, Raiders, Commanders. Those are games, like you mentioned, where you have to build. You have to establish this new offense. You have to continue the role of the defense last year into this season. Those are the games that you establish yourself. And I'm not saying those are bad teams. I think a couple of those teams could end up being a tough opponent. But the good news is you get them in the first 5 weeks of the year. Usually teams that are on the rise don't have everything figured out by then. And then you look at it, Eagles, Bengals, Ravens. Okay, that's kind of a tough 3-stretch game. But like I just said, you should have the majority of it figured out by week 5, week 6, at least some of the nuts and bolts. And by that time, hopefully, fingers crossed, Chubb will be back. So that'll be a key piece of your offense returning. So yeah, then it's Bengals, Ravens, Chargers. Then you get the bye week. Out of the bye week, you have the Saints. I don't personally see the Saints as a super tough team. They got a lot of problems. They have some talent, but they got some problems. And then the Steelers game. That's going to be a big one. Broncos. That should be an easy game, I would say, but you never know. And then you get the Steelers again. Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens. So, Tristan, I think the NFL did us a favor by starting off the year kind of light, figure things out, and then you get into, okay, here's a test. Here's a game you should win. Here's a tougher game, and you kind of factor that in throughout this schedule. I think it's to the benefit of the Browns because you have that Week 10 bye week. It is not early on. Like I said, you get an easy-ish start, and then it's not too crazy until you get, I would say, about week 12 on, I would say, is where the meat and the potatoes of the schedule is, where you have the Steelers, Broncos, Steelers, Chiefs, Bengals, Dolphins, Ravens. You have your 3 divisional games, and then you have a Dolphins team that's really good. You have a Chiefs team that's really good. And the Broncos last year, Tristan, they beat us. We were very injured, but they fought. They fought, and a Sean Payton-led team, I think, is going to have some fight to them. So, you never know how tough that game could be, prime time. But all in all, I think even though the schedule is difficult, the Browns can and will, or should, compete in every single one of these games and can win every single one of these games. We have the talent. We have the ability. Are we going to go undefeated? Probably not. But, again, we have the talent. It's just putting it together, figuring things out here. So, yeah, like I said, 12 of the teams that we play finished with a winning record last season. You had mentioned it, the division games. Those are huge. You mentioned it last time. I don't want to steal your point, so this is Tristan. He said this. But the Bengals last year, right? They, despite having some injury issues of their own, struggled in the division. One divisional game?
They went 1-5 in the division. They have
Yep.
8 total losses, which means that they went 8-3 against non-divisional opponents, and they still missed out in the playoffs.
Yeah. So, listen, I don't care if the Browns go undefeated on this schedule and lose every game in the division. You have to handle business in the AFC North, and it's tough, but we're built to do it. We are built to do it. And Tristan, I think, in all honesty, the Browns' best case scenario, given the strength of schedule here, I think you need to sweep a team in the division and possibly 2 within the division, which I think is possible. I think it is possible. It's not easy. But, we've done a good job against the Bengals for the most part. Ravens always a tough game. Steelers always a tough game. So, got to handle the division games. And I think everything is gonna fall into place here. So, do you have anything else you want to add on that?
Yeah, just kind of before we get into our tests and stuff like that, just a couple of side notes I wanted to point out. So, week 1, Brady starting his broadcasting career in a game with the Cleveland Browns. It's kind of poetic because, Bill Belichick started his head coaching career as a Cleveland Brown. Yeah, I mean, that I think that was just something that's important to note. It's pretty interesting. And then I also wanted to point out the Thursday Night Football game against the Steelers. I think that at that point in the season, I think that's the game, especially with the national media attention and everything. I think that's the game where Deshaun can finally, make the team. I guess, what's the best way of putting this? He could make his kind of cloud around him right now, like this cloud of uncertainty, cloud of negativity, he can make it disappear for the most part. Obviously not talking about the off the field stuff, separate, strictly on the field with on the field performance. I think that's a game where he could make a lot of the negativity towards him go away because it's a primetime game against a big rival that, just last year he struggled in primetime against the Steelers. So, I think that's a game where if he played well, right, and he was the reason we won, I think that it would make a lot of people shut up. And I think that's going to be important for him. Um, Time will tell. We'll see if it happens or not. But I just highlight for him specifically, I think that's an important game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a couple games on the schedule where the Browns have a chance to make a statement. I think opening against the Dallas Cowboys, right? That is a team that we'll see. We'll see what happens with the Cowboys. They're always good in the regular season. And sorry to say, but they fall apart come playoffs. It's just a yearly tradition. But getting a chance against a good defense week one, that's going to be fascinating. But the Cowboys have issues of their own. So I think we can, and I think we will win that game. And then, you look at some of the way these games line up, right? And I talked about this the last time we talked about this, the first time. Couple games that I just flat out want to win just to win them because I want revenge. The New Orleans Saints, they came to Cleveland in a game that was cold, windy, snowy. They had no business coming from New Orleans, Louisiana to Cleveland, Ohio and winning that game. Got to get our revenge there. The Denver Broncos game, week 13, 2 weeks later. Same thing. I mentioned it earlier. Last year, I did not like how they kind of handled us, right? Hitting DTR, like the way that all happened, that left a bad taste in my mouth. And I would love nothing more than to go to Denver Monday Night Football and just absolutely stomp them. That would be incredible. So, those are two games that I want to get for us personally, just because get that taste out of my mouth.
Yeah. Sorry, real quick. I just want to throw this out there. Bro, NFL, get creative, man. Why is it always Denver and the Jets for us for primetime games outside of the division? Like, is there really nothing else? Like, they can't give us anything else? Come on, man. Like, that's just ridiculous. It's always those two teams. It's always those two teams. And it's ridiculous. But sorry, that was my rant. Go ahead.
No, you're good. But yeah, those are the games I want to win. But I mean, Tristan, not talking about like our toughest test, but just statement games that we can have here, right? Opening against the Cowboys. Eagles is a team everybody really has high hopes for good reason. They're a good football team. The Ravens, always tough. But like you mentioned, the Steelers, first time, prime time, that's in Cleveland, Thursday Night Football. You have to go make a statement. You have to go make a statement. And then the next two, Chiefs, right? We don't get to play the Chiefs often. That's a team that is, waiting for somebody to take them off the mountaintop. And, the Browns have a chance week 15 later in the season. That's a game that could be critical for AFC playoff seeding. Hopefully the Browns are in that conversation. If you can go out and beat the Chiefs and make a statement there, that's a huge deal. And then 2 weeks later, Dolphins, right? That's another team that playoff team last year was pretty good. They were tough. They had some wars last year. They put up 70-something points against the Broncos, right? That's not an easy football team. And, if the Browns can win some of these tougher games, I think we'll be in really good standing if we handle business in the division and take care of that first. So, what do you think about that? What do you think about? Let me ask you this side note, real fast. What do you think about our primetime matchups? I thought it was fascinating how they're two different points in the season, but back-to-back weeks, Thursday night and then Monday night, and then Thursday night and then Sunday night. Weird.
Yeah, definitely weird. I didn't even catch that. We have 2 Thursday night football games.
We do. One Monday, two Thursdays, and one Sunday, which I love. I love Sunday night football. I'm pumped about Sunday night football
Sunday
being
night
back
football
to
is always a
Cleveland.
blast. I didn't realize we had 2 Thursday night football games. Are you kidding me?
Yep.
That, like, no wonder why they said we have the hardest schedule. Who has 2 Thursday night football games ever?
Get your Prime account
What the hell
active.
is that? Oh yeah, no, that's but regardless, what I will say is doing a Thursday night and then a Monday night, like, it makes sense to get the extra day back. Yeah, no, that I don't know. For me, I just I agree with you. It's you got to make statements with those. Um, you know, Validate the opinions and the thoughts of the fans, right? Go out there and in those games, like, you don't even necessarily have to like demolish a team or in every case win, right? You just have to go out there and do everything well. Like, do everything to the best of your abilities, right? And just execute. And I think most games, if we do those things, we win because we have the more talented team most of the time. The only team I could really say, like, you know what, they might have more talent is the Eagles on our schedule. Like, outside of that, I don't think that if you go by position, I don't think that there's any other team really on our schedule. I'm trying to think off the top of my head that has better talent or equal talent to us. I just don't. But yeah, I gotta highlight those those primetime games. They're important, and especially when dealing with a quarterback that has a lot of uncertainty. He needs to get some of that off his back, just because it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure, and if he can come out and he can play well in those primetime games, there will be less question marks. There'll be less noise around him, and I think that would benefit him. So, time will tell. We'll see what happens. But with that being said, Derek, do we want to get into our top 5 toughest tests?
Yeah. Do you want me to go first or you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Okay. So on a tough schedule with a lot of interesting positioning, how some of these teams line up. I think there are 5 clear toughest tests here. So for me, number 1, Dallas Cowboys, week 1. We've mentioned it multiple times now. But being that it is such a national forefront, being Tom Brady's first game, and first game doing commentary, not his first game. We ain't going back to 2001. But being that it is such a big moment against a good team, it's America's game of the week, I believe. At home in Cleveland, it's a good opportunity with the national limelight on you. To kind of come out and make a statement early. Week 1, right? The Browns came out last year, opened against Cincinnati Bengals. A lot of people thought that was going to be a tough game. A lot of back and forth all offseason last year. What did the Browns do? They go out and they handle business. They dominate defensively. Offensively, that was kind of a bad weather game, so it was, it was what it was. But all in all, the Browns came out looking good to start the season. I think it is a little bit different this year, given that it's not somebody you see all the time, and the Browns are going to be tested. I think that is, for me, it's one of the top 5. Second is the Philadelphia Eagles. You mentioned it. It's away, so that's a big thing. It's not at home. It's against a team with one of the best rosters in the NFL, a team that is continuously adding and building onto their roster, and there's some familiarity between the two organizations, so that'll be fun. But the Eagles are a good team. I know a lot of people think like that's not going to be as good of a game as people think or as tough. I think it is. I think it absolutely is. So they're number 2 for me. Number 3 is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Prime time at home, Thursday night football, first primetime game. It is week 12, and it's not the first divisional game, but it is an important one. It is an important one to, like you mentioned, make a statement. And it's not necessarily that the Steelers are a fantastic team or they're next level elite, whatever you want to say, but those games are always wars. They are always wars, and you have to go win the first one. You absolutely have to, put your flag in the ground and, take care of business in that one. So that's third. Fourth, Chiefs. This is an obvious one. I should not have to explain myself why the Chiefs is a tough matchup. Super Bowl champions, despite having issues at receiver, they add Hollywood Brown, they add Xavier Worthy. So getting the Chiefs at home in Cleveland, knowing what happened against the Chiefs in the playoffs, I hope this team will have some fire under them to go win this football game. Not a whole lot to say on that. It's the Chiefs. Of course, they're going to be on this list. And then the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are a fascinating football team. I think the Dolphins are kind of, I don't want to say revolutionizing football, but they're changing football from their structure and how they run their offense with speed, with quickness. And then defensively, the way they kind of structure things, right? Bringing in Jalen Ramsey. I know he was hurt at the majority of last year, for a good part of last year. But for him to come in and have an impact that he does, and just kind of the structure of that team, that is a tough team. And getting them on Sunday Night Football, how are the Browns going to be able to match up against their speed? How are the Browns going to handle that? It's going to be a playoff game, I would assume. At least at that point, these two teams hopefully are competing and fighting to be playoff teams. So I expect that to be a playoff atmosphere. 8:20 kickoff, Sunday Night Football. That's going to be fun. That is going to be a fun game. So, Tristan, for me, the top 5 toughest matchups I have for the Browns this year: Cowboys, Eagles, Steelers, which you could say the whole AFC North, but that one in particular I think is a huge one, and then the Chiefs and the Dolphins. Those are my top 5 toughest matchups. So, sir, what say you? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And what is your list?
Pretty much just show the same thing. Let's go in order. All right. So week 1, Cowboys. I'm gonna try my best not to piggyback off of things you've already said. I'm gonna try to fill in the gaps here. We're like-minded individuals. That's why we do this. We like each other.
There we go.
That week 1 matchup's huge. It's going to be our first taste of what this new offense is going to look like. Mm-hmm. It'll give us a good indicator of, right, how much progress needs to be made, right? How far along is Deshaun Watson into learning the new offense? How far along are we from having an offense that can, click and be one of the best in the league? Hopefully is what we would say. Cross our fingers, right? How good will Jerry Jeudy look? Is it going to be a seamless transition? There's so many question marks. And when we look at the opponent, right, the Cowboys, obviously like the most followed team in the National Football League. Their demise comes around like Christmas, always once a year. It's going to come. Cowboys fans, don't even deny it. And everybody has smiles on their faces on that day. So that's another reason why it's like Christmas. Anyways, let's move on. But yeah, just an important game. It's gonna be a tough test, and it's gonna be a good benchmark for where we are in our progress, right? Because I think that game, after that game, we'll have a better understanding of where the team is at, right? It's still going to be incomplete, right? Probably up until we get to that Eagles game. But we'll have a good understanding of what the potential can be for this team and what things can we realistically expect to improve. It's just so many thoughts, so many opinions, and so many projections are going to be able to be more easily made after we see how they perform week one. And it's going to be a tough challenge. Micah Parsons is, he was deserving of the Defensive Player of the Year award last year as well. And you know what? I think that's going to be something where, you know what? Let's see what this new offense has against one of the best defensive players in the league. It'll be interesting to see, that's for sure. But let's move on to that next game, right? That I had already mentioned, the Eagles. Like I said, the Eagles are probably the hardest or most skilled team from top to bottom that we will play this season. I really think that they just have so much talent all over the field. Looking at some of their young defensive players, looking at the receiving core, the O-line, even though they lost Jason Kelsey, they picked up Saquon. Like that's a good team, right?
I forgot.
Exactly. It's going to be a tough game. We'll see if Saquon's healthy for it, but
Well, yeah, there's that.
it's just. But regardless, I'm throwing so many shots right now. I gotta reel it in. But yeah, no, I think that when we look at that game, I think it's gonna be a tough one for the Browns to win. I gotta be honest. Looking at it from afar right now, man. First off, it's an away game, right, and that matters. That matters, especially when it's a rowdy crowd like Philly. And it's against probably your most on paper skilled team that you will play in the whole year. It's going to be a tough test for sure. And you know what? I think that's a game where, win or lose, the Browns are going to figure out a lot of things about themselves. And yet again, it's going to give us a better blueprint on what to expect the rest of the year. So my third thing, and this is kind of cheating, you already kind of hinted at it, all the AFC North matchups. Like, I kid you not, if it had to be strictly just 5 games, which, I mean, that probably was what it was supposed to be, but I just said screw it, because these games are just too important. There's 6 of them, and all 6 matter. Mm-hmm. All 6 have so much weight to them. I mean, oftentimes when we look at divisional games, we look at it and we say, okay, those games are worth like 2, right? Because it gives you 1 and takes 1 away from a divisional opponent. This year it feels like it's worth 3.
Yeah.
It feels like it's worth 3 because, I mean, just the gravity of how tough these games are going to be and how important it will be for seeding. I'm not kidding you, Derek. There's going to be a team in this division that does really well outside of the division, struggles in the division, and it screws their season. It happened last year with Cincy. I'm predicting, I don't know exactly who, but it's going to happen again for somebody. And it's very, very important that it doesn't happen for Cleveland. Yeah. Each of those games matters so much. And if I only had to put down 5 games, I'd put down 5 of the 6 AFC North games. That's how important these games are.
And leave off 1 against the Bengals because we're probably going to handle that anyway. No, I'm just kidding. There's another shot for you.
That's another shot. We got to put the guns away. We got to put them away. All right. So let's move on. You kind of already mentioned it. The Chiefs game. Mm-hmm. That's just one that you want, man.
Yeah.
That's one that you want. I remember the pain that I felt when they got the fourth down conversion with Chad Henne.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, it was such a kick to the gut, especially after Hollywood Higgins
Mm-hmm.
got targeted and it didn't get called and they got the touchback. So much scar tissue right there. Like it occupies a part of my brain that until we are lifting Lombardi, I will never let go of, no matter how hard I try. And and then we look at the next season. It was like week 1, I think. Actually, we opened up the season with them, and I remember it came down to another Baker Mayfield last minute drive, and he threw an interception. And just how badly I wanted that,
Mm-hmm.
because of what happened before that get back, and we never got it. It would be cool to be able to have some form of get back on them. We'll see. We'll see. And then the Dolphins. You kind of already mentioned it. That's a game where it's a very, very talented team, very fast offense. But also it's a game where I feel like the Dolphins are going to have to prove themselves a lot. And here's what I mean by that. Last year they sucked against teams over 500. They were brutal against teams over 500. Let's be frank here. And I think that this year they're gonna have to be better, but also the expectations on them are so much greater this year, because not only did Buffalo take a deep step back, right, because of all the people that they lost, but I feel like Miami also took a step forward. Like, they had a good offseason.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that team has to win the division, and I feel like if it's not, like, I just feel like that could be a game for them that they could look at and say, like, okay, we actually really need to win this one, because if Buffalo can hang around them, be within a game or two of them the whole year, and then they lose that game, that puts so much pressure on them, and I think that's going to be important for them. It's also, I think, important for the Browns defense, right? Last year there were a lot of parallels drawn between the two because they were both going at historic rates, and now we get to see them face off, and it'll be a tough matchup. But ultimately, I actually think the game will be decided on the other side of the ball: the Browns' offense versus the Miami Dolphins' defense. It's just such an intriguing matchup. It's such an intriguing matchup from, like, not even necessarily just a Browns fan perspective, but just an NFL perspective. Like, one of the best defenses going up against one of the best offenses. Excuse me. I think that there's a lot to it, and I think it's going to be an intriguing game and that a lot of people are going to have their eyes on. No wonder it's a primetime game. No wonder it's a primetime game. You can hear the storylines already about last year this team had the best offense, last year this team had the best defense. It's written in the stars. And, we'll see how it goes. It's going to be intriguing, though.
Yeah. Yep. You ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
All right.
So, I guess I'll leave this. So,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Hey, listen, we are 50 minutes in, and I don't know about you, man, but it has been a long week, long working week, been brutal. Let's truck it out. All right. So, last thing here. So, Derek, kind of when we look at the schedule, we factor in not only these tough tests that we've listed out, but also kind of these stretches, the tough stretches in the middle of the season, the end of the year. Do you believe that the Browns, number one, can make the playoffs, and number two, should make the playoffs?
Yeah, so the Browns haven't made back-to-back playoffs since 1989. So this is yet another huge milestone that we're trying to get over here. And again, the Browns play 12 teams that finished with a winning record last year. This is on paper toughest strength of schedule in the NFL. And the question of, can we do it? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, the Browns can make back-to-back playoffs. Now, there are a lot of factors, right? Injury. being a huge, huge one. That is what held this team back last year. But I think last year is a great indicator as far as answering that question, because you look at what that team did last year, despite all the adversity, despite all the roadblocks, still went 11-6. Yes, you disappointed in the playoffs, but you made it there, and you had no business making it there. How did it happen? It was the mentality. It was the will to win inside that locker room. It was all those guys coming together as one, pushing towards that goal despite what it looked like. And ultimately, they got the job done. They made the playoffs. Even if it didn't go as planned, they got the job done. And when you look at this schedule this season, it is not easy. It's not. But teams rise, teams fall, right? Some of these teams on this schedule that we can look at and be like, man, that might be tough. It's one injury away from being an easy win. And that's the tough reality of the NFL. But we talked about it. Handle business within the division. If the Browns simply can handle business inside the AFC North, toughest division in football, it doesn't matter how the rest of these games go, right? You don't have to win every game. But do we have the ability to? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you saw that last year. And it just comes down to continuing what we did last year and establishing the new, right? The new offensive scheme, the new offensive weapons, getting guys back from injury, getting them up to speed, and then just getting on a roll, right? We talked about it. From Jacksonville on to week 5 against Washington, those are games that you have to build on. You have to take step by step and really establish what this team is. Getting Chubb back at some point in that time is going to be critical. And listen, this team can do, I think, whatever they want. I think there are little to no limitations on this football team. It's just going to be a matter of actually putting it together, continuing what we've already started. Now, should the Browns make the playoffs? Same answer. Yeah. Yeah, we should. Why? Because we're one of the best teams in the NFL. So I don't care that we haven't made back-to-back playoffs since 1989. I don't care that we've had all sorts of injuries. I don't care that we're in the toughest division. You are forged by fire. That is what this is. That is what this team is and has been. And I expect nothing to be different heading into this season. Right? This is a good football team. We have a really good football team. And I'm so happy with the additions and the plan and direction that we have going forward that I think translating as soon as next year, right? Guys getting a second chance, guys getting moved into positions, that they're better succeeded in, right? Jerry Jeudy coming onto this team, going to be a huge difference. The new offensive style, it's going to all be huge things to benefit us going forward. So, all in all, yes, for both questions. Absolutely yes. So, what say you, sir?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the should they make the playoffs, right? And my answer is simple. I agree with you. It's a yes. Top to bottom, when we look at this roster, it's one of the best in the league, if not the best. Right, on paper, you've got everything you could ever ask for. The addition of Jerry Jeudy is so huge for this offense. Adding Ken Dorsey is so huge for this offense. And retaining Jim Schwartz and all of the defensive players that made this defense special last year is so crucial for the team's success. And also just the players you're going to have healthy again, like Nick Chubb. Having him back is so huge for this team. Deshaun Watson coming back healthy, could be huge for this team. I think that the should we make the playoffs question is a yes. 100% yes. Because even though we have the hardest schedule, I've already said this, the teams right behind us are the Ravens and the Steelers. It's because we play the division. That's why our schedule is so hard. Right. I think that we should be making the playoffs. Now, will we make the playoffs? I'll make this even simpler than just a yes. Actually, I lied. It's not going to be simpler. But it falls on 4.
Yeah.
It falls on 4. If Deshaun Watson has a good year, I think that this team... Let me just say this. If Deshaun Watson can play at the level that we have seen him play at his best in the NFL, this team... You know what? Screw it. This team could go 16-0, 17-0, right? If he plays at his absolute best, right, the whole year, that's the talent that this team has. They could do that, right? Will we get that? Who knows? Probably not. We're not going 17-0. Okay, I know I threw that out there. We're not going 17-0. But that's the ceiling, in my opinion, if you get everything you can out of Deshaun Watson. But at the same time, if you get the Deshaun Watson that we've seen so far in Cleveland, or a Deshaun Watson that is incapable of stepping up his game, there's a chance this team goes 8-9.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just the reality of it, right? And that's why it's so hard for me when I look at this team, feeling comfortable about this year, right? And I don't think that we should feel comfortable, Derek. I think it's okay for us to not be comfortable. And, it shows that, we have a talented team that we believe in, but at the same token, we aren't established, right? And if we make the playoffs again this year, I think that we take a bigger step closer to doing that. And what I will say is this when it comes to Deshaun, I am choosing to believe in it, right? Because we've seen him do it at the highest level before. And I think that with the changes that we made to personnel, to, our staff around him, play calling, coaching, I think that every move that we have made this offseason has been to get the most out of Deshaun Watson, to build up his confidence, to get him in a system that he's comfortable in, and to start to finally get that guy back, right? And it doesn't have to be week 1. It doesn't have to be week 10. It doesn't even have to be week 17 that we get that guy back. It's got to be round 1 of the playoffs. We get that guy back. Right. Anything else that happens outside of that, as long as he's good enough to get us in, outside of the playoffs doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if he has, 5,000 passing yards, 2,000 rushing yards, 60, 70 touchdowns. It doesn't matter. It matters what he can do for us in the playoffs. Because at this moment, I'm not interested in anything else outside of the playoffs. Just being blunt with you, Derek. We haven't had enough playoff football. Just haven't. Even though we've had a 2-time head coach of the year, we've got a defensive player of the year, we've got a coaching assistant of the year, comeback player of the year, offensive rookie of the year candidate and Baker Mayfield, who finished second. So many players, so much talent, so many accolades outside of playoff success. We need to get playoff wins and multiple playoff wins. That's all I have interest for this year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, listen, the schedule is tough, yes, but it's only as tough as you make it, right? Things are only as tough as you make it. And even though we have the toughest schedule in the NFL, that doesn't matter. How are you going to handle it? Are you going to come out week in and week out and put up your best effort? Are you going to come out and, take a fight to every single one of these teams? Again, we can win every single one of these games. It's just going to be a matter of actually establishing things, getting in rhythm, getting things going, and continuing that mentality. And I think we can. I'm excited. I'm pumped. But Tristan, you got anything else you want to add before we hop off here? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Damn, almost perfect show. Uh, so, uh, no, just I'm excited for training camp. Excited for preseason. We're about, jeez, we're still like 2 months away. 3 months from actual like game one,
Mm-hmm.
like week one. Like, oh, it's heartbreaking to think about how long it is, but I'm just so pumped for it. I'm ready.
Yep. Yep. Me too. All right, everybody. That'll wrap it up for the second time. Hopefully there will be no problems. But if you stay to the end, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Love y'all. Hope y'all are doing well. Drop a comment. Let us know what you think. Like the video. Would appreciate it. That would help us. So
Yeah, if you're listening to this an hour in,
yeah.
please like the video.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's... If you can stick with us for this long, you can hit one button. But all right, everybody. We'll see you in the next one. Go Browns.